Yo, we back with another one. Goku and DC Season 4, Episode 15. This episode would be a Piccolo versus Piccolo. Alright, Father Son Showdown. And, a fun fact about when I make these videos, the longest thing that I work on is the thumbnail, man. I thought this thumbnail was clean. But yeah, that's always the longest thing it takes to do is make a thumbnail. And I'd be so sad when I make this cool thumbnail and then it doesn't really take off on the algorithm. But it is what it is. Anyway, I just wanted to give that out. Shout out to the members, man. Jason 57835, John Lane 2016, OD Demon Wolf 34, and Quad A Moke, man. I appreciate it, man. Y'all help me get more and more improvements for this channel. All right, y'all are investing in this, man. I appreciate it. Anyway, let's get into it. All right. King Piccolo blocked a savage elbow strike, the impact sending a shockwave through the sulphurous air. He didn't flinch. Instead, a cruel smirk split his ancient face. Your technique is sharpened, he rasped, his voice like grinding stone. The precision, the economy of motion, it speaks of a warrior's discipline, but your mind is a fog. He shoved Piccolo back, not with the overwhelming power, but with a contemptuous, effortless push. I can feel it. The hesitation, the conflict within. You fight not with the singular purpose of a conqueror, but with the fractured conscience of a protector of sorts. He spat the word as if it were poison. Earth's weakling philosophies have infected you, it seems. You worry about the collateral damage, and you measure your strength against some arbitrary sense of fairness. You carry the weight of your restraint like a chain, and it's weighing you down. He circled his son with his burning eyes dissecting him. My will, however, is pure, unburdened. I desire dominion, and every action serves it. You have become diluted, paralyzed by their notions of honor and allies. You spent years with Teth Adam, and you've assisted that fool Goku, learning his clownish camaraderie, it seems. And now you dare to stand before me, your own father, with a flicker of their doubt in your eyes. That is why you will fail. Your power is bound by the very sentiments you were born to erase. The stillness between them shattered in a simultaneous explosive decision. Father and son did not lunge with fists or feet. They spoke with pure power. Their left arms snapped up in a mirrored gesture, palms facing each other across the blighted clearing. In King Piccolo's clawed hand, a vortex of sickly, blood-orange energy coalesced, crackling with the raw, devouring hunger of Trigon's dimension. In his son's, a sphere of intense focused, bright orange light, it ignited, laced through with a sharp, defiant yellow crackle. There was no taunt, no war cry, only a mutual, annihilating intent behind their building blasts. And then they thrust their palms forward as one. Two beams of cataclysmic energy, one of roaring river of hellfire, the other of piercing lance of sun-colored ki, screamed across the short distance and collided, not with a simple explosion, but with a matter-tearing shriek. The point of impact became a miniature sun of conflicting energies. A white-hot orb of negation that swelled for a nanosecond before detonating outwards. The resulting blast was a sphere of silent, obliterating force that vaporized the ground for 50 yards in every direction, swallowing the two Piccolos whole. A dome of superheated dirt, molten rock, and shredded ionized air erupted upwards, followed by a deafening Krathum that rolled across the wasteland like the hammer of a god. The shockwave flattened the few skeletal trees that remained and sent a rolling cloud of choking radioactive-like dust and ash billowing outwards. A gray black shroud that swallowed the battlefield and painted the hellish red sky with the layer of scorched earth. The pillar of fire and vaporized earth began to settle, and from within the swirling acrid heart of the blast zone, a massive silhouette emerged, smoke clinging to his shoulders like a cloak. King Piccolo strode forward unbothered, his form only singed at the edges. His crimson eyes locked onto a figure skidding backward through the molten slag. His son. One arm raised defensively, chest heaving. The younger Piccolo's boots carved deep, streaming furrows as he fought for balance. He'd matched the blast, but the raw, devouring quality of his father's hell-tainted energy had pushed through, leaving his guard shaken and his senses ringing. as he looked up just in time to see the demonic king vanish. Not with speed, but with a teleportation that cracked the air like thunder. He reappeared directly above Piccolo, not falling, but planting himself. King Piccolo's foot, wreathed in cracking crimson energy, slammed down like a piston onto his son's collarbone. With a sickening crunch of fracturing bone, the impact drove the Namekian into the ground with the force of a meteor strike, cratering the semi-molten earth and sending a fresh shockwave of dust and debris pulsing outward. King Piccolo stood atop his vanquished son, applying crushing, deliberate pressure, grinding him deeper into the bedrock as he struggled. King Piccolo's heavy boot ground into his son's chest, the pressure making it hard to breathe. The younger Piccolo strained, his muscles bunching as he tried to shove the weight off. But the hell-forged power of his father was an immovable mountain, it seemed. Looking down at him, King Piccolo's expression was one of a profound and very contempt. Pathetic. He rasped, the word laced with a bitterness that went beyond mere anger. I spawned you, poured my very essence into your creation, not as a mere copy, but as an expected evolution. I envisioned a successor who would learn from my imprisonment, who would wield my power with a cunning that I lacked in my own arrogance. You were to be the perfected demon king, ruling the world I nearly claimed, unburdened by sentiment, a true force of nature. He leaned his way forward, eliciting a pained grunt from below. And what have you become, right? What do you have to show for it? You've become a sentry, a guard dog on a leash, fetching scraps of power from an old tyrant in a forgotten desert somewhere. You were made to hold the world in your fist, to hear your enemy's screams as your anthem, to reshape continents to your will. Instead, you settle for defending a single patch of dirty sand, answering to the whims of a man who calls himself a king. You traded the throne of a planet for a footnote in the history of a backwater nation. You are not my successor. You are my greatest failure. The disappointment in his eyes was colder and more cutting than any hatred. The pressure on Piccolo's chest was more than physical. It was the weight of his father's legacy, a crushing verdict of every choice that he had made at this point. As King Piccolo's words began to echo, failure, guard dog, footnote, something within the younger Namekian didn't break. It simply ignited. His crimson eyes, pinned beneath his father's hellish gaze, began to flicker, and a faint golden light sparked deep within them and taking its place. Fighting against the surrounding crimson gloom, the air, thick with sulfur and decay, grew heavy with a new charge, ancient, sacred, and utterly defiant of the demonic corruption. You're right, old man, Piccolo forced out through gritted teeth, his voice a strained growl that nonetheless carried a terrifying clarity. I am not the successor you wanted. The gold light in his eyes intensified, bleeding into a crackle of yellow energy that licked from his skin, pushing against the oppressive weight. I chose my own path. He sucked in a pained final breath, and with it drew upon the covenant etched into his very soul. His voice, when it came, was no longer a growl, but a thunderous command that shook the battlefield, a word of power that was both a denial and an awakening. Shazam! The sound was a clap of pure creation, a colossal pillar of divine lightning, blinding white gold, and wreathed in archaic runes of power, lanced down from the swirling blood-red sky. It did not simply strike King Piccolo, it erupted between them. The celestial hammer blow of the gods hit with the force of like a solar flare, blasting the Demon King off his son with a deafening kraboom that echoed like the shattering of a world. King Piccolo was hurled backward. A smoking, furious comet of shadow and rage, carving a trench of molten glass through the very wasteland that they were on. The divine energy receded, leaving Piccolo standing in the epicenter of a scorched, glassy crater. He was transformed. His black gi remained, but over it now lay a long, flowing golden cape that billowed in the non-existent wind, its high collar framing his head like a halo. The lightning bolt symbol on his chest blazed with captured sunlight. But the power was not a calm, steady flow. It was like a storm that was barely contained within a vessel. Golden electricity, raw and erratic, crackled across his form in snapping, unpredictable arcs. It didn't just outline him, it writhed around him like angry serpents of energy, earthing itself into the ground with sizzling pops and lashing the air with whip-crack sounds. His eyes, now glowing with the fierce, unwavering light of the sun, held a wild, untamed intensity to them. This was not the polished might of a seasoned champion. It was the furious, explosive awakening of a god's power channeled through a demon's will. An unstable, terrifying fusion of opposites. King Piccolo picked himself up from the smoldering trench, his body steaming, his eyes narrowed, not in pain but in analytical fury, as he took in his son's new form. The aura wasn't one of serene control, but of volatile, barely leashed potential. Piccolo's transformed figure flickered, not with speed, but with the absolute negation of space. In the time it took a synapse to fire, he was no longer in the crater's center. He was simply there, directly in front of his father, the vacuum of his movements sucking the air inward with a thunderclap of displaced atmosphere. King Piccolo's eyes had only begun to widen when the golden fist connected. The impact was not a punch, but it was like a localized cataclysm, a shockwave of concussive force, pure and white-hot, erupted from the point of contact into a perfect sphere. The very sound of it was torn away, replaced by a profound pressure. Cooker's silence for a single heartbeat. Then the world screamed back. The ground beneath King Piccolo's feet did not crater. It evaporated in a flash of superheated silica, collapsing onto a bowl of 100 feet wide. The force did not stop there. It transmitted through the bedrock with a seismic fury. The surrounding wasteland convulsed around. Cracks, deep and glowing, spiderwebbed outwards from the epicenter like a pane of shattered glass. Entire plateaus of scorched earth sheared off and slumped into the new streaming basin. The air itself shook, visible, as a rippling heat haze distortion that radiated for miles, carrying a blistering wind that scored the landscape clean of dust and debris. In the heart of the very devastation, wreathed in a snapping golden lightning, stood Piccolo, the son who had chosen his own path. His fist was still extended, the air around his knuckles shimmering with released divinity. Below him, buried deep in the newborn smoking crater, was the broken silhouette of his demon king father. King Piccolo roared, a sound of pure scraping fury, pushing himself up from the smoldering pit. Embers of hellish energy ignited around his clenched fist, coalescing into a swirling orb of dark, corrosive orange. He drew his arm back, the air sizzling with the promise of annihilation. But, before he could unleash it, his target simply vanished. There was no blur, no telltale shift in the air. Piccolo simply ceased to be in front of him and reappeared a mere foot behind his father's shoulder. The transition so seamless it seemed reality had stuttered. Before the Demon King's senses could recalibrate, he felt the air behind him thicken, grow heavy with ozone and ancient power. He started to turn, but it was too late. Piccolo's hand was already raised. Fingers splayed not toward his father, but towards the blood-red heavens above. A searing bolt of divine lightning, no wider than a man's arm, but concentrated to a sun-hot core of intensity, was ripped from the sky and into his palm. In the same fluid motion, he slammed the captured thunder directly into King Piccolo's exposed spine. The effect was catastrophic. The bolt didn't just hit, it unfolded inside him. King Piccolo's body went rigid, every muscle seizing as raw celestial power ravaged his demonic circuitry. He was launched forward, not like a projectile, but like a discarded puppet. Limbs flailing uselessly, he tore through the air for half a mile, a smoking comet of spasming green flesh and tattered clothing, before cratering into a distant rock formation with the sound like a mountain falling. Stone dust plumed into the crimson sky, marking the violent end of his counterattack. The younger Piccolo hovered silently, a golden sentinel against the bleeding sky. Below, his father stirred within the fresh crater chunks of shattered rock tumbling from his shoulders. The Demon King pushed himself up with a grating slowness. The spoke of cracked ribs and probably scorched nerve endings. Yet as he rose to one knee, a low sound escaped him. Not a groan of pain, but a dark, rattling chuckle that grew into a full, contemptuous laugh. Piccolo's brow furrowed behind his golden aura, the crackling energy around him snapping with irritation. "You find this amusing," he intoned, his voice layered with divine resonance. "Your own power was not enough, child. What is left to laugh at?" Excuse me. "Your own power is not enough, father. What is left to laugh at?" King Piccolo lifted his head, a smirk of bloody defiance in his ruined face. "I laugh at the very irony itself, boy," he rasped, each word laced with smug revelation. "You stand there, wrapped in borrowed light, looking down at me like some sort of judge. You preach of choosing your own path, yet when pushed to the brink, you kneel and beg for strength from higher powers." He spat a glob of blackened ichor onto the glass ground. "You rely on the borrowed magic of false gods. Fine. A quaint trick." His burning eyes gleamed with a vicious, knowing light. "But if we are playing that game, then two can play it." A cold dread, sharp and instinctual, cut through Piccolo's divine fury. What game? His father's confidence was not the bluster of a beaten foe, it seemed. It was like the calm of a gambler that was revealing his final trump card. King Piccolo looked up. The divine crackle of yellow lightning around his son Piccolo sputtered as a new profound wrongness scraped against his senses. What? His father's laughter echoed, not with desperation, but with a dreadful certainty. "Very well," King Piccolo roared, his voice no longer addressing his son, but the churning crimson sky itself, it seemed. "You see my predicament, devourer. My own flesh betrays me with a borrowed light. If my will serves your feast, then let your power be my answer. Lend me the strength to break down this rebellious child. Show him the true cost of his defiance." The plea was a blasphemous prayer. The air above the Demon King coagulated. The swirling blood-red clouds above him didn't part. They focused. A single dense column of utter blackness shot through with veins of pulsating scarlet energy, lanced down from the very heavens, and it struck King Piccolo with the sound of like a universe tearing. This was not a healing light, it was like a violent transfusion. The hell beam didn't just envelop him, it reforged him. His body convulsed, muscles and sinews visibly swelling and restructuring under the skin, which darkened to the color of burnt charcoal. Jagged spikes of crimson crystal erupted from his shoulder blades and spine. His very silhouette grew hulking and monstrous as the red electricity crawled over him, solidified into like a permanent, crackling aura of pure hate. The ground for 50 yards around him blackened and died. Life extinguished in an instant. Piccolo hovered back, his golden eyes wide not with fear, but with a cold, dawning comprehension. This was no longer a personal battle for legacy. His father had willingly erased the last shred of his own sovereignty and became a direct conduit to the living vessel of Trigon's will. The smoke and dust from the cataclysmic infusion began to clear, revealing not a king, but a true herald of the end of the world. That's where we're going to end it right there. Let me know what you guys think, man. And this is King Piccolo's new transformation. I don't know what I'm gonna call it. I guess I'll call it Hellfire Piccolo or something. Let me know in the comments what would be a cool name for it. Not that they don't matter. Anyway, I'll catch you guys on the next one, man. Peace.